Today is the 7th and last day of the JulAug-85 7-Day retreat. This talk today will not be like the rest of the talks during the week, but I will read from a book which I've done many times in the past. It's from the writings or the Zen teaching of Wang Po, as translated by John Blofeld. Since every once in a while someone asks, I will mention that I'm not bringing Wang Po in as the final authority, or any authority for that matter. Because in this work of looking into oneself, seeing the truth of oneself, there is no authority. There's only the seeing. To have a change of words may be helpful, but to put upon a pedestal or venerate the person or personality who says those words may be a comforting activity, but it does not mean understanding what the words are actually pointing to. This book is called Zen Teaching of Wang Po, translator John Blofeld, recorded. These are talks and dialogues recorded by Pei Su, who was a disciple of Wang Po, at the same time a high government official. I think he was the governor of the province in which Wang Po had a monastery. This is not a straight reading of a text, but it has been edited by myself. Words are words, sentences or paragraphs are left out. At times words are changed, substituted by simpler, more accessible words. The writings themselves come out of the Buddhist tradition. The reference to becoming a Buddha, meaning to become an enlightened being. The word Dharma is usually translated by me as teaching or truth, depending on the context. If one has heard the texts many times, can one listen without remembrance, meaning an open listening which is not separate from seeing and feeling? The Master said to me, all the Buddhas and all sentient beings are nothing but the one mind, beside which nothing exists. This mind, which is without beginning, is unborn and indestructible. It is not green nor yellow and has neither form nor appearance. It does not belong to the categories of things which exist or do not exist, nor can it be thought of in terms of young or old. It is neither long nor short, big nor small, for it transcends all limits measures, names, traces, and comparisons. It is that which you see before you, begin to reason about it, and you at once fall into error. The error of separation, the reasoner and what he or she reasons about. The reasoning in itself may be without error, it may be logically consistent, but may have nothing to do with the real thing that one is reasoning about. It is like the boundless void which cannot be fathomed or measured. The one mind alone is Buddha, and there's no distinction between Buddha and sentient beings, but that sentient beings are attached to forms and so seek eternally for Buddhahood. By their very seeking, they lose it, for that is using mind to grasp mind. Even though they do their utmost for a full eon, they will not be able to attain it. People do not know that if they put a stop to conceptual thought and forget their anxiety, it will appear before them. How deep this conditioning for trying to get something, to attain something, to become somebody is, only becomes apparent when one sits or walks. It's not the sitting that is the only mode of discovering things, but when the mind quietly observes its own conditionings and not takes them for granted or rationalizes, justifies, or sanctions them religiously. Many people in this retreat have become aware how deep this longing to become, to attain, to get something is lodged in the body-mind. Which is separation between me and that which I want to get or become in the future, all of which the product of thought, the me, the goal, and the time. We've gone in great detail, with great care, into all of these things in past talks. Here's a dialogue between Wang Po and Pei Su. The one who recorded it and asking the questions. A question which is asked in every retreat. What is the way and how must it be followed? Because that there is a way from here to someplace in the future is deeply lodged in the mind. And one has to question it, whether this is a concept or whether one really sees that, whether there is such a thing. So here the question, what is the way and how must it be followed? Also to asking for a method to follow. A method to get there. Or a system. And Wang Po says, what sort of thing do you suppose the way to be that you should wish to follow it? The questioner says, what instructions have the masters everywhere given for meditation practice and the study of the Dharma, or the study of the truth? Saying, I'm not just interested in yours, but all the masters. You're not the only one. What have all the masters given as instruction? What is the ultimate authority? If I know about these instructions, I will follow them. And why will I follow them? Because I want something so badly. And why do I want something so badly? It's because I'm afraid of being nothing, insufficient, lacking. And in this state of fear and wanting, the human being is ready to follow almost anybody or anything. Submit to any kind of a practice. As long as the fear and the wanting are the dynamo behind it. And in following a practice or a teacher, is there the exposure of the fear and the wanting? Or does the following and practicing cement it over, bury it, distract from it, away from it, from understanding in total depth fear and wanting, and in the understanding being free of it? So let's ask here the question again. What instructions have the masters everywhere given for meditation practice and the study of the truth? And Wang Po says, words to attract the dull of wit are not to be relied on. Minces no words. He's not afraid of losing students. Questioner, if those teachings were meant for the dull-witted, I have yet to hear what truth has been taught to those of really high capacity. And Wang Po says, if they are really people of high capacity, where could they find people to follow? If they seek from within themselves, they will find nothing tangible. And this is not an axiom now to be committed to memory, but to find out for oneself what is within me. If I have a feeling there is something, some entity, some soul, some truth, some Buddha nature, some Atman, why not look for it? Give one's life to it. And one will find out. If they seek from within themselves, they will find nothing tangible. How much less can they find a teaching worthy of their attention elsewhere? Do not look to what is called the Dharma or the truth by preachers, for what sort of Dharma or truth could that be? Pei-Su says, if that is so, should we not seek for anything at all? Wang Po, by conceding this, you would save yourself a lot of mental effort. Now comes the next step in the mind of the questioner. One puts oneself into it, realizes one has asked this question oneself, it comes up to oneself. But in this way, he says, everything would be eliminated. There's an error in reasoning. And certainly not looking concretely what state of mind may emerge when there is no seeking. The thought is, if I don't seek for anything, then there's nothing. It's not even good reasoning. But this is how thought operates. In this way, everything would be eliminated. There cannot just be nothing, he says. And Huang Po says, who called it nothing? Who was this fellow? But you wanted to seek for something. And Pe Su says, since there's no need to seek, why do you also say that not everything is eliminated? Huang Po says, not to seek is to rest tranquil. Not to seek is to rest tranquil. Because this whole momentum of seeking can come into view if one is aware and looking and wondering about what's going on inside. This whole momentum of seeking can be there in all its mental and physical manifestations. And if one looks at it, sees it, I'm putting this as though there is a seer. If there is looking and seeing, it dissolves. And the attention remains. Provided one doesn't have the firm belief and conviction that there has to be a seeking for something or an attaining of something. If that belief is firm, then the perception and the looking is twisted, is distorted by the belief. So often people say, what's wrong with believing? There's nothing wrong, there's nothing right about it. But it does not open up completely the doors of perception. As something that's hidden or tied or dark or twisted. Something one doesn't want to shake. There's also fear that the belief may be rattled. That one may possibly lose it. And then there's not the fullness and freedom of looking unconditionally. Not to seek is to rest tranquil. Who told you to eliminate anything? Look at the void in front of your eyes. He uses this word void. Meaning, look. Just look. Void meaning not at this detail or that detail, but just look. Not at anything in particular, just the looking, the seeing. The openness, the unbiased openness. So this he calls, look at the void in front of your eyes. How can you produce it or eliminate it? It's there. Pe Su said, if I could reach this truth, would it be like the void? trying to think it out. This is what the brain is made for and is doing, to always think things out. But there are things that it cannot think out. It has to be quiet for seeing to come into being. Attention, awareness, call it what you will, insight. Wang Po says, morning and night I have explained to you that the void is both one and manifold. I said this as a temporary expedient, but you are building up concepts from it. And the questioner says, do you mean we should not form concepts as human beings normally do? And Wang Po says, I have not prevented you. But concepts are related to the senses. When reaction takes place, concepts are formed, wisdom is shut out. Meaning, what becomes important is the conceptual thinking, the thinking in concepts, which is like a screen blocking out that. What is there, what is actually there. Pei Su says, then should we avoid any feeling in relation to the Dharma or to the truth? And Wang Po, where no feeling arises, who can say that you're right? Pei Su, why do you speak as though I was mistaken in all the questions I've asked your reverence? And Wang Po says, you're a man who doesn't understand what is said to him. What is all this about being mistaken? And Pei Su says, up to now you have refuted everything which has been said. You've done nothing to point out the true teaching to us. As the image of the teacher as somebody who gives something. And as the truth as being something that can be gotten by me, carried home. Wang Po says, in the true Dharma or in truth there is no confusion, but you produce confusion by your questions. What sort of true teaching or truth can you go seeking for? And Pei Su says, since the confusion arises from my questions, what will your reverence's answer be? And Wang Po, observe things as they are and don't pay attention to other people. There are some people just like mad dogs, barking at everything that moves, even barking when the wind stirs among the grass and leaves. He says here, regarding this Zen doctrine of ours, since it was first transmitted, it has never taught that men should seek for learning or form concepts. Studying the way, in quotation marks, is just a figure of speech. It's a way of arousing people's interest. In fact, the way is not something which can be studied. Study leads to retention of concepts, and so the way is entirely misunderstood. Moreover, the way is not something especially existing. Truly, it is not located anywhere. First step is to refrain from knowledge-based concepts. This implies that if you were to follow any method to the utmost limit, on reaching that limit, you would still be unable to locate mind. At another place he says, when we talk of the knowledge I, in quotation marks, underline, when we talk of the knowledge I may gain, the learning I may achieve, my intuitive understanding, my enlightenment, my deliverance from birth, my moral way of living, our successes make these concepts seem pleasant to us, but our failures make them appear deplorable. What is the use of all that? I advise you to remain uniformly quiescent and above all activity, which is easier said than done. It's good advice. How does the mind remain uniformly quiescent? Maybe taking a walk through the beautiful woods and meadows on a clear day like today, or sitting in a well-lit, quiet hall, not needing to relate to anybody, but in one's daily life, at the job, in the family, commuting to the city. How can the mind remain uniformly quiescent? Maybe one should never even ever establish such an ideal, because one will be constantly frustrated. Or is there something deeper? That in the midst of turmoil and agitation there can be is it possible a deep stability and awareness of what goes on the surface, the waves, the foam, the bubbles? Can one live out of a deep quietness, even though one is engaged in activities that at times may be upsetting? Can this awareness be there in the thickest turmoil? Because turmoil implies no awareness, but it can dawn at any instant. And the mind is really needing to know how it operates, how it affects itself and other people. And there's a real deep sense of responsibility for everything one does. Not shoving that off to anybody else. He says, do not deceive yourselves with conceptual thinking, and do not look anywhere for the truth. For all that is needed is to refrain from allowing concepts to arise. It's obvious that mental concepts and external perceptions are equally misleading, and that the way of the Buddhas is as dangerous to you as the way of the demons. At another place he says, so full understanding can come to you only through an inexpressible mystery, meaning no explainable causes, no causes. We think by our efforts which are causes, we will bring about effects. But we talked about it the other day, when in the midst of a daydream or a fantasy, all of a sudden one comes to, one wakes up. What effort brought that about? One was dreaming. There was no effort to bring about attention, and yet it dawned. This may be a very partial attention, a very brief, but yet one becomes aware that the daydream is going on. Here he says, full understanding can come to you only through an inexpressible mystery. Can come to you, he says. He doesn't say, do everything you can to come to it. It's the quiescence of the doer, of this eternal inside doer, namely thought, and the understanding of that, seeing it, having observed it. The doer always wanting to do something toward reaching his goal, and whatever he does just adds to thoughts and confusion and the feeling of separation, because the activity of thought is self-separating. That's what it is, and one can observe it and understand it directly, immediately, and intimately. He says the approach to it is called the gateway of the stillness beyond all activity. The mind really quieting down. When one needs to listen, one becomes still. No one has to tell one, sit still or no moving. One needs to see something, watch something, listen to something. And when one even holds his breath, one becomes so still. Quiet. One realizes the moment theories crop up about what this is, there's already an interference, so seeing it is putting it aside. Seeing the arising of explanations. One can see that's not what's here. What is it? What's here? Inside or out, it doesn't matter. It's the same perception, the same awareness. He says, if you wish to understand, then know that a sudden comprehension comes when the mind is purged of all the clutter of conceptual discriminatory thought activity. Those who seek the truth by means of intellect and learning only get further and further away from it. Not till your thoughts cease all their branching here and there, not till you abandon all thoughts of seeking for something, not till your mind is motionless will you be on the right road. Here he brings in the road again. Because we never know what the Chinese word was. But there's no road from here to there. There's a road, several roads from here to Springwater. Many of us have walked. And P.C. says, at this very moment, all sorts of erroneous thoughts are constantly flowing through our minds. How can you speak of our having none? And P.C. says, error has no substance. It is entirely the product of your own thinking. If you know that mind is fundamentally without error, Whenever thoughts arise, it will be clearly seen that they are responsible for errors. If you could prevent all conceptual movements of thoughts and still your thinking processes, naturally there would be no error left in you. Therefore it is said, when thoughts arise, then do all things arise. And all things means all the emotions, anger, resentment, fear, or desire. When thoughts vanish, then do all things vanish. That's not true. Not all things vanish, and everything is there as it is. Sparkling clear. Here at another place, he says, Wang Po says, how is it possible that Gautama Buddha, who denied all such views as those that I have mentioned, and we haven't read those, could have originated the present conceptions of enlightenment? But as these doctrines are still commonly taught, people become involved in the duality of longing for light and eschewing darkness. In their anxiety to seek enlightenment on the one hand and to escape from the passions and ignorance of corporal existence on the other, they conceive of an enlightened Buddha and unenlightened sentient beings. Let me assure you again that the Buddha dwells not in light nor sentient beings in darkness, for the truth allows no such distinctions. Buddha is not mighty nor sentient beings feeble, for the truth allows no such distinctions. Buddha is not enlightened nor sentient beings ignorant, for the truth allows no such distinctions. It's all because you take it upon yourself to talk of explaining Zen. And later on he says, above all, have no longing to become a future Buddha. Your sole concern should be, as thought succeeds thought, to avoid clinging to any of them, or to avoid escaping. Just to see it, and then if one sees one is about to enter into a dead alley of thoughts into which one has entered about 1,000 times, why does one have to enter it again when one sees that? It's finished. One doesn't see it, there one is in the dead alley again. And if one wakes up to it, can one see what has happened and refrain from judgment, condemnation, or just all the stuff, all these auxiliary dead alleys? Nor may you entertain the least ambition to be a Buddha here and now, that is taught in the Zen tradition, when one recites every day that one is a Buddha. One is a Buddha, but one also is going to become one. Or wake up to the fact that one is one. Even if a Buddha arises, do not think of him as enlightened or deluded, good or evil. Hasten to rid yourself of any desire to cling to him. Cut him off in the twinkling of an eye. On no account seek to hold him fast. Buddha meaning also an instant of clarity, oneness, whatever. On no account seek to hold it fast. For 1,000 locks could not stay him, nor 100,000 feet of rope bind him. Then he says, I will now make luminously clear how to set about being rid of that Buddha. Consider the sunlight. You may say it is near, yet if you follow it from world to world, you will never catch it in your hands. Then you may describe it as far away, and lo, you will see it just before your eyes. Yeah, when the doer is quiet, when the seeker is worn out by understanding its own futility, then here, lo, it's just before your eyes. Follow it, and behold, it escapes you, run from it, and it follows you close. You can neither possess it nor have done with it. Here, Pesu says, how then does a man accomplish this comprehension of his own mind? Always we come back to the how, which implies give me a lead, a cue, or a method, a system. And Wang Po says, that which asks the question is your own mind. But if you were to remain quiescent and refrain from the smallest mental activity, its substance, the mind's substance, would be seen as void. You would find it formless, occupying no point in space, falling neither into the category of existence or non-existence. Later on he says, there is no self and no other. There is no wrong desire, no anger, no hatred. These are all in quotation marks, meaning the word, the idea of it, the reaction to it. No like, no victory, no failure. Only renounce the error of intellectual or conceptual thought processes, and your nature will exhibit its pristine purity. Unless you understand this, the whole of your great learning, your painful efforts to advance, your austerities of diet and clothing, will not help you to a knowledge of your own mind. All such practices must be termed fallacious. What end is served by pursuits like those? And he says once more later on, as it is, so long as your mind is subject to the slightest movement of conceptual thought, you will remain engulfed in the error of taking ignorant and enlightened for separate states. This error will persist regardless of your vast knowledge of the Mahayana, let's say these are Buddhist scriptures, or of your ability to pass through the, quote, 4 grades of sainthood, the 10 stages of progress leading to enlightenment, also, end quote. For all these pursuits belong to what is ephemeral. Even the most strenuous of your efforts is doomed to fail, just as an arrow shot ever so high into the air must inevitably fall, spent to the ground. Here he says, though others may talk of the way of the Buddhas as something to be reached by various pious practices and by sutra study, you must have nothing to do with such ideas. A perception, he says, a perception sudden as blinking, that subject and object are one, meaning that there is no separation between seer and seen or listener and sound. A perception, sudden as blinking that subject and object are one, will lead to a deeply mysterious, wordless understanding. And by this understanding, you awake to the truth. When you happen upon someone who has no understanding, you must claim to know nothing. Meaning, don't start proselytizing. This is what he's saying. Or, he says something else here. He may be delighted by his discovery of some way to enlightenment, yet if you allow yourselves to be persuaded by him, you will experience no delight at all, but suffer both sorrow and disappointment. Even if you do obtain from him some trifling method, it will only be a thought-constructed thing, having nothing to do with the truth. Truth is not, what does he say? Truth is something never lost to you, even in moments of delusion, nor is it gained at the moment of enlightenment. In it there is neither delusion nor right understanding. It depends on nothing and is attached to nothing. It is all-pervading, spotless beauty. It is the self-existent and uncreated absolute. Then how can it even be a matter for discussion that the real Buddha has no mouth and has no teaching, or that real hearing requires no ears, for who could hear it? Ah, it is a jewel beyond all price. I brought another reading here. I don't know whether it's too late. You can abbreviate it. It's not very long. It is a question answered by Krishnamurti, which appears in the bulletin number 50, autumn-winter 1984. This question was put at Brockwood Park in England, September 81. And the questioner says, "You say liberation is not an individual matter, but concerns humanity as a whole. Yet liberating insight has been the unique achievement of individuals like the Buddha and the Christ, and perhaps yourself. How can it be a matter for the whole of humanity?" And here's Krishnamurti's answer. First of all, let's leave the Buddha, the Christ, and the speaker out of it. They are not important. You know what disciples do? Disciples destroy the teacher. They invent a lot of theories, a lot of nonsense, write about them, they are the interpreters, and you know what takes place then. So let's look at the question very carefully, if we can liberate ourselves from these figures. First, is insight, which is the liberating factor, is insight an achievement? Is it granted or given only to the few? Is it something that demands an utterly unselfish life? Is it something that is not personal? To go into this, one must go still deeper to realize that the world is me and I am the world. That is a fact for me, for the speaker. The speaker is not separate from the world, and the world is not different from him. We have already gone into this sufficiently. Human consciousness, with all its contents of belief, experience, knowledge, memory, fear, pleasure, suffering, anxiety, loneliness, despair, and all the pain of the world, is common to all mankind. This is so. It is common to us all, whether we live 1,000,000 miles away or very close. So you are the world psychologically, and the world is you. Now, is liberation, illumination, or that enlightenment reserved only for the extraordinary few? Or if you had that tremendous insight into the wholeness of life, would your consciousness be totally different? Naturally it would, because that liberating insight frees you from all the content of that consciousness. The pain, the anxiety, the loneliness, sorrow, depression, all that is wiped out. It is a fact, if you do it, and it can be done. And it is not reserved for the few. But we human beings are not persistent. We do not apply ourselves continuously. We are slack. We do this one day, and we are weary of it the next. We slack off. So the ball is never in our court. It is always in other people's courts. If you as a human being recognize that you are the whole of humanity, and that therefore you are extraordinarily responsible, without any feeling of guilt, then your consciousness undergoes a change, obviously. That is the liberating factor of insight. If you have that liberating factor of insight, and you have transformed your consciousness, you're bringing a factor of something new into the whole consciousness of humanity. You understand? We are saying that if you transform yourself through the liberation of insight, you're communicating it to the whole consciousness of man. This happens. The great rulers of the world, the great killers of the world, all have affected the human mind. Attila, Genghis Khan, Napoleon, Hitler, and on the other side, Buddha and others. They all have affected the human mind, the human consciousness. But if we actually daily live with this intelligence, the insight which liberates, then we are bringing to the whole of the consciousness of man a totally different value, a different movement, which is not based on knowledge. It is based on insight and intelligence. We will end here for today.